So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Evan. I work with Preset, and I'm a PMC member in the Superset community, and I'm probably talking to many of you on Slack. And on that note, actually, I want to go ahead and invite folks to Slack that are not already a member of the Superset Slack community. I'll paste the link here in the chat, and please feel free to join if you haven't already. It's a really great place to reach out about features and bugs and get more involved in all sorts of ways. So please join us there. And then on that note, I also created a channel for today. So if you're watching this later on YouTube, then you can go ahead and join us and drop your questions asynchronously in this channel called Meetup-DBT. And if you are here today, presently and live, you can also drop questions there. But for the most part, you can use the Q&A tab on Zoom to drop questions there, and then Beto and I will do our best to address them live. But we can't get to everything probably, so the Slack channel is a great place to drop them otherwise. And let's see, then also for those who want a little reading material, there's a blog post that relates to today's content. I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in the not Slack, but in the Zoom chat as well. So please feel free to give that a little reading when you have time. But right now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Beto. Take it away.
All right, thanks, Evan. Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Beto de Almeida. I'm a software engineer at Preset. I've been working with Superset for, I don't know, six years now. I worked with Superset before I joined Preset. I'm a big fan of DBT. I worked on the integration. I'm gonna talk more about this, but I think DBT and Superset, not only they work really well together, they share a lot of the same design principles. Yeah, and I'm super excited to do this demo. I have to give a warning here that the demo is going to be boring if everything works well, and I think that's the best kind of demo, when things just work. There's no surprises. It's just but let's see. Let me share my screen here. Have a few slides. Okay, Evan, are my slides showing up okay?
You're good.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about syncing data sets and metrics from DBT Cloud to Preset specifically. So my agenda for today, one of the reasons we ran the poll, I just like knowing the audience and making sure everybody at least gets something from the presentation. There were a few people who never heard of DBT before, some people who are beginners. I'm going to do a very quick, just like introduction to DBT, DBT Cloud, what they do, and then how metrics are defined currently in DBT, how we define them in Apache Superset, how do we translate from one to the other, and then pros and cons of each approach. And then today we're focusing on DBT Cloud. So I'm talking about setting up a DBT project in DBT Cloud. I'm just going to show how my project is set up. And once we have a DBT project running in DBT Cloud, we can go on and sync those data sets, those models. So the DBT models, they get synced to Superset data sets, and the metrics, they also get synced. And then I'm pretty sure we're going to have time. We'll do a QA. We can talk about the integration. And if we have time, I'm happy to answer more generic and broad questions also. Okay, so DBT. DBT, this is my definition. It's a parameterized source control transformations in your warehouse. So DBT lets you define source control, which I think is important. So you can track lineage of data transformations. You can track revisions, versions, and basically you can reproduce your transformations. So with DBT, usually you're going to use probably using GitHub to store your definitions, and DBT will read those definitions and apply those transformations in your warehouse, right? So if you've never heard of DBT, I think this is a concept you should have. DBT reads data from your database and writes new data to your database, basically. So it transforms your data in a controlled way. dbt uses SQL plus Jinja. Jinja is a templating language implemented in Python. And this is why I mentioned like Superset does the same. In Superset, you write SQL and you can like introspect Jinja templates in that SQL if you're creating a data set, if you want to create something fancy. As I mentioned, it generates and runs queries in your warehouse. And the dbt semantic layer is changing fast. So I'm talking about kind of the old school semantic layer here, where the metric definitions are just stored. So you can define metrics using the dbt domain specific language. And those metrics, if you're using dbt core, which is the open source version of dbt, they don't get materialized, they don't get computed. All you're doing is storing these definitions. dbt cloud, so dbt cloud is to dbt exactly as Preset is to Apache Superset. dbt cloud is a SaaS offering. So you run on the cloud, you connect to your GitHub project, you connect to your database, and then it will schedule jobs for you to compute those transformations. And if you're using the metrics in dbt cloud, then they start offering a service where it can compute those metrics for you. So with that service, you can say, hey, I'm interested in a metric called I don't know, my example metrics, I worked at Facebook, I worked at Lyft. So my go-to example metrics are likes and rides. But let's say you want sales, you want to look at sales on a weekly basis for people in France. So they now offer a service where you can ask the metrics to be computed for you. Whereas with dbt core, you need to compute them yourself. Currently, Superset and Preset by extension, we do not support the dbt metric proxy or their semantic layer, but that's in our roadmap. And since we're talking about dbt, we're talking about Superset. We want to look at metrics in both. So in dbt, metrics are now a first-class object, so you can define your metrics associated with a model. So here on the left, we have a metric with a name. It's called new customers. It references a model. And important things about this metric definition is there's a calculation method, which is count. There's an expression, which is customer ID. There are a timestamp column. So first order date is your timestamp column. And then you have time grains in which you can compute the metric. So similar how in Superset, if you're visualizing a metric, you can choose your time grain. This is the same concept, but the main difference is that dbt will only allow you to compute the metric in these time grains. Well, Superset follows more a philosophy of like, hey, we're all consenting adults here. You know, if you want to compute time grain on like yearly basis, go ahead. Similarly, you have dimensions associated with the metric. So here we have like a first name. Maybe you want to look if you have more customers called John than Paul. dbt again restricts your group bys, your filters to the specified dimensions. And metrics, they can have one or more filters associated with them. So here for new customers, we have number of orders equals to 0. So this is basically how inside dbt you would define this metric called new customers, and it's attached to a model, right? Customers. On the right, I have the free-form SQL translation of how that metric could be computed, right? And we can see we're basically doing a select count customer ID from that model. This could be a table, could be a view, and we're filtering based on that filter. So where number of orders equals 0, right? So we can see it maps the dbt definition to SQL. There's a very clear mapping, but we can also see that the DBT metric definition is not super expressive because you're limited to basically like an aggregation, a column, and a list of filters. So you can't do something fancy like do a join in your metric definition, do subqueries, or have, I don't know, having expression in your SQL. But on the other hand, it's very easy for users to get started because these are like very simple, basic concepts that exist across all BI tools. When we try to represent this metric in Superset, we hit a problem, and I said there are a few differences here. So Superset does not enforce time grains and does not enforce dimensions. You can use them at will. But the biggest problem we have is that in Superset, a metric is an expression. So just something that you select. So it's part of your projection. And in DBT, as we saw, we have here like a projection, which is count customer ID, but we also have a filter. So we have number of orders equals 0. So when we translate this metric to Superset, we have to combine the filters and the projection in a single expression. And there's a really like well-known way of doing this. This is an old like trick in the book of SQL. So we basically do a count here. So we're using the calculation method count. And we put a case when inside the count. So if numbers of orders equals 0, then we have the column customer ID. So we're counting customer ID. And if no when conditions match, you get a null. So the default case for the case statement is the null value, and the null value is not counted. So what this is doing is we're basically counting all the rows, but when number of orders is not 0, we have a null there for customer ID, so we don't count that. So this is how we translate these metrics from DBT that have a projection and a predicate into a single expression in Superset. Both approaches have pros and cons. DBT has the benefit that if you have an index on that column, you have a where clause. So if you have an index, you're going to benefit from that index. The problem, and maybe DBT is doing something fancy here and smart that doesn't require this, but like I haven't looked under the hood for this, but as a general like rule of thumb, if you're doing let me go back here, if you're doing this query here on the right, because if you're computing multiple metrics, for each metric, your predicate will change. So number of orders equals 0 might be different for a second metric that you're computing from the same model. And because the predicate is different, you need to run as a separate query to compute multiple metrics. While as here, we're doing a single scan of the table. So if we have multiple metrics, we can just do a single scan and we can compute all the metrics in a single pass. But because we don't have a where predicate here, we need to scan the whole table. Unless you have some kind of really smart database that can optimize this query and maybe like push the predicate from the projection, but I wouldn't count on that. So as I mentioned, Superset needs to scan the whole data set, which is bad. On the other hand, we can compute multiple metrics in a single pass. So like we can conclude from this, if you're computing multiple metrics at the same time, in general, Superset will be better. If you're building charts that query a single metric, then DBT would probably be faster. But like there's a lot of other stuff involved. This is just like as a rule of thumb. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how do we sync these models, these metrics into Preset. Today, we're talking about using the Preset UI to synchronize from DBT Cloud. But we also have a tool that is a command line interface. So we have a Preset CLI. And the Preset CLI lets you synchronize these data sets, these models, both from dbt core and from dbt cloud. So if you're using something like dbt core, you can use the Preset CLI, and you can synchronize your data sets, your models, not only to Preset, but the Preset CLI works also with open source Superset. So today, if you're on the open source stack, if you're using dbt core, you're running Apache Superset, you could use the Preset CLI to do this process for you. And also, if you're using dbt cloud, it also works. The Preset UI does not work with dbt core because we need like API endpoints to get that information. And if you're running dbt core, you probably have your project in some kind of repo, and they're not standardized endpoints like there are in dbt cloud, where we can fetch all the metadata that we need. So Preset CLI, it's a Python-based CLI, and we have a blog post explaining how to use it. It works really well if you have like a GitHub action. So if you have your dbt project in GitHub, you can have a GitHub action running, every time you merge into master, and then it will like synchronize all your assets. The CLI has an advantage over the UI that we're going to talk today. The CLI has access to your database credentials. So because the CLI is reading from a repo, you can have your credentials as secrets. So the CLI can create and sync databases also. So let's say you're running dbt with BigQuery, the CLI will create BigQuery in Preset or Superset. It will create all the data sets and all the metrics based on that. The disadvantage is like it's a CLI, it's more complicated. Setting up GitHub actions is not hard, but it's not trivial also. So again, pros and cons. Well, the Preset UI that we're going to talk today is much easier. It's a web interface. It's built into Preset, and so you just need to do a few clicks. This is the boring demo that I talked about, and that I'm going to show in a few minutes. So the Preset UI, when you create a database, it will talk to the dbt cloud API endpoints, and it will fetch all the information about data sets and metrics. Because the API, the dbt cloud API, does not expose your database credentials, we cannot create the database for you. So you need to go to Preset and manually create the database first, right? And as I called out here, that's a good thing. You don't want dbt cloud API exposing your database credentials, even to an authenticated client. That's just bad practice. So while in the CLI, you can just run it and it will create everything for you. If you're running the UI, it starts by creating a database and then attaching the dbt cloud information to it. And as I mentioned, this only works with dbt cloud because we need the standardized API endpoints where we can fetch basically the definitions of models and metrics so that we can build those data sets. The biggest advantage, like I said, it's easy to use. Okay, let me do a demo here. I'm gonna leave presentation mode. I have my cheat links in the bottom, but I have this public repo called dbt integration blog post. And if you're familiar with dbt, if you've done the tutorial, they have this tutorial called the Jaffle shop, where you have like that customer's model that I showed. So it's a very simple getting started tutorial. We have like customers, and then we have a few staging tables. And what I did, this was before they had a separate project with metrics. I added a few metrics here. So we have that metric, new customers with filters. I have a metric called total customers, which is just a count of customer ID. paying customers, number of orders greater than 0. And then we have a derived metric here. A derived metric is one that references, as you can see here in the expression, it references other metrics. So basically, we have these 4 metrics: new customers, total customers, paying customers, and the ratio of paying customers. Here in dbt Cloud, so here I'm in dbt Cloud, and if I go to projects, I have my Jaffo Shop project here, and we can see it's already configured to point to that repo, and I'm using BigQuery for this example. Like if you follow the tutorial, they have all the data you need already in BigQuery. So all you need to do is add your credentials, and then you read from their project in BigQuery, and you write the output in your project in BigQuery. So it's pretty simple, right? We create the connection, point to the repo, and then I hope this won't show my credentials. So I have some credentials here, and oh, this is not what I want. I want service tokens. So to connect Preset to dbt Cloud, we're going to need a service token. I have a few here already set. And when we create a new token, dbt demo, I'm not going to create, but we need 2 sets of permissions. First, we need an account admin, and we need this so that we can list your accounts in your project. We need to list your account, we need to list your projects, we need to list your jobs, and we need to list eventually your models. So in order to allow you to choose which project you want, which job you want, we need these credentials so we can see all of them. And then we need a metadata only. And to be honest, maybe the account admin is enough. But you know, for good measure, let's add metadata only here, so that we can fetch the metadata. And metadata, I mean the data, the models definitions, and the metric definitions. I'm not going to create this because I already have one. So we have our project, we have a service token, and then I have a job here configured. So I have this metric jobs, and I can see it's running fine. So with the synchronization, like our end target is a job. So dbt has this hierarchy of accounts, projects, jobs. So we're going to read the definitions from a job. And there's some important things here. That's basically the version. I think you want to run, I think we're on 1.5, dbt is on 1.5. You want to be at least on 1.4, so that metrics get computed correctly. And that's it on the dbt side. So I added my repo, I configured my database, I created my token, and I have my job running. So, and I can see that this is healthy. I've been running this for a while. Once we do that, here I'm in preset. Let me zoom in a little bit. So again, as I mentioned, there's no way of using the synchronization to create a database. So we're going to have to create a database ourselves. And it has to be, of course, the same database that is being used for the dbt project, because that's where the data lives, right? So I'm using BigQuery. I have my credential file already prepared. And then I'm going to connect to BigQuery. It connected fine. And then the one thing you're going to notice immediately is we have this dbt Cloud tab here. If you're used to open source Superset, you notice that this doesn't exist in Superset. So if you're running Preset, we inject this component in the open source Superset. And here we need to put our dbt cloud service, which I think I have saved here. So basically, this is the access token with admin account and metadata only permissions. Once we do that, and now this is all JavaScript, we can query the dbt cloud API and list all the accounts associated with that token. I only have one preset, and we're a partner. I can see my projects there. So Jaffo Shop. And then once I choose a project, I can see all the jobs associated with that project, metrics. And then finally, I have my models. I can either choose a few models here, or if you're familiar with DBT support like a graph selection domain-specific language, right? So you can do things like, if you do like plus customers, you're saying, I want the customers model plus everything upstream. Or I could say, I want customers model, everything upstream, everything downstream. And I think you can do like, I want customers and 2 levels downstream. So we do support that graph node language that DBT supports. So we re-implemented it in Python. You can use it here, which makes it easy for you to migrate only a few. Like you can use tags. So I want, maybe I want project X. So this will migrate everything that has the tag project X. I'm going to keep it simple, because even though if this is a boring demo, it is a demo, and I don't want to upset the demo gods. So okay, so we click next, and yeah, we're ready to connect. We got this little summary. So this is our account, our project, our job, and then the models we chose. We click finish. And then if we go to datasets, they should start trickling in. We have the first one, customers. If I refresh my browser, there should be more. Yep. So we can see that they're all synced right now. They are coming from my BigQuery database, from this schema. And metadata gets carried on. So this table shows as verified. So this little check mark says, hey, this is a verified table. This is data you can trust. And you get this message saying, hey, this is synced from DBT Cloud. Description, if you have any description, let me show here our model. So if you go back to our model, customers, there should, no, where does this go? Schema, that's it. Description. So customers has a description. So we can see that get carried on, 1 record per customer. There's a few other things that I didn't cover. We covered this in the blog post. You can attach Superset specific metadata to your DBT project. This gets synchronized also. So here for this model, I want to set a specific timeout for my cache. So if we edit here, if we go to settings, we can see that the cache timeout was set to 600 based on your DBT configuration. So it's a really nice way of like, centralizing your metadata, your metrics, all your definitions in a single place, and having DBT be the source of truth for these like core tables in your organization. And what else do we have here? And then the other thing I mentioned, if you go to metrics, we can see that the metrics get translated. Let me see if there's a metric with a description here. New customers has a description. So if you go to new customers, the description gets synchronized. We can see that the metric got translated in the way I mentioned. So new customers, we have this count of case when, number of orders equals 0, customers who bought some, and then the ratio becomes a ratio. Yeah, and then here on columns, there's nothing super exciting. These are the columns of our models, and they got synchronized. That's kind of a low bar if it didn't. So columns are here, but most importantly, metrics are here. They're translated correctly, right? And yeah, what else can I show here? I think. Oh, the other thing that is important is if you try to change something and save, you actually can't. You get a pop over that says this data set is managed externally and can't be edited in Superset. Otherwise, if you save this, the next time your model synchronized, your changes would be overwritten, and it would be a confusing and unexpected experience. So all these models, they're synchronized and they're set to read only, because the source of truth again is DBT. And then once we have these data sets, we can start exploring them. So we have our metrics here. So let's look at, I don't know, total customers. Let's just look at, this is not a super interesting data set, but okay, we have 100 customers. Maybe we can group by, like I said, first name. Oh, this won't group by. Let's go to in the pie chart. So if we group by first name, we don't need this field. Oh, this is the temporal field. Okay, so here we have total customers. So their orders grouped by first name. So it's not super interesting. No like outliers. You can see that people are pretty consistent. Most people with a single order, and then Adam, Shirley, they've been buying more than other people. Like I said, nothing exciting here. It's just a data set, and you can do everything you can do with Superset. And I think that's it. You can always go back if you add more models. You can always go back and edit. When editing, you need to provide your key again. And this is a trade-off between convenience and security. We don't want to have the backend sending your key to the front end. That could be intercepted, that could be captured. So we store your, like, this DBT access key, we store it encrypted in the database, and once you provide it, it never leaves the backend. So the front end will never see it again. Like I said, as a measure of security. So you'd have to put your key here again if you want to edit. But once you put your key, then you can just change whatever models you want to sync. And here I removed 2 of the models. We only have customers. And one thing you notice is that these models, they don't get deleted. And they don't get deleted because people might have created charts on top of them and dashboards on top of them. So what will happen is they will stop synchronizing, but they will still be there. It's also like another trade-off. Like the alternative would be to delete a bunch of downstream assets, delete charts, delete dashboards, and we think that that's a terrible experience. So what happens is they will stop synchronizing, but they will still be there. And then maybe we should remove these. I'll create a ticket to remove the certification symbol. And I think that was it. I can start sharing.
Fantastic.
And yeah.
Thanks. There are a few questions that came in, so we'll just go ahead and jump right into a few of those. One was about which DBT plans include these service tokens, and someone was kind enough to answer in the Slack chat that the team plan includes that, and the enterprise one as well. I'd tack on a question there that probably other people will want to know is, can you use the personal API access tokens for this, or does it have to be the service token?
I don't know actually. Because I don't have a personal account. I have the preset token.
Okay.
But I assume like as long as I assume a personal token would have all those permissions, right?
I would think so too. Maybe if somebody else doesn't have one of those accounts that includes the service tokens, try your personal token, and or we'll experiment with that.
Yeah,
With some
yeah.
documentation.
It might not work because right now it's personal does not have API access. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
Well, there we go.
yeah.
And then let's see, another person was asking, well, actually, before I get on to other questions, a quick poll, and let me see if I can make it go live. Poll has been launched. All right. So this is a question of, are you a preset customer currently? And one thing we didn't talk about here is that the UI integration is actually a preset enterprise tier feature. So if anyone here is not a preset customer at all, then let us know in the poll if you see that. Hopefully you do. But if you are not an enterprise customer and want to have this feature, I'll go ahead and add a link where you can contact our team about that and inquire further. So that should now be in the chat. All right, and then we'll circle back to a couple of other questions. Somebody asked about, is there a link to read more about the preset CLI? And the answer there is yes. I will go ahead and paste the link to that. And to reiterate something that was said previously, the preset CLI does work for not only preset, but open source superset as well.
Yeah. And we have a couple blog posts also on the CLI.
Yeah, in fact, I can probably paste one of those links really quick here.
Yeah. And I just want to like call out one thing that I know I think it makes me proud of preset. Like one of the reasons, I think the reason why the CLI works with open source is we want people to be able to migrate from superset to preset, but also have a way of migrating from preset to superset if they're unhappy, right? That's one of the biggest benefits of open source. You don't have vendor lock-in. So the CLI not only works with superset and preset, but it allows you to move assets between them. So if you want to try preset, you can move everything you have, and then if you're a customer, you're unhappy, you can leave.
Yeah. And then there was another question. I think you covered this earlier. Someone was asking if this is just using DBT metrics, which is on the way toward deprecation, or are we using metric flow? And I think that was on our roadmap, if I remember.
Yeah, right. This is like the old pre-transform acquisition metrics. And yeah, supporting the new metrics is in our roadmap.
Then,
oh, the poll doesn't work?
Yeah, apparently the poll doesn't work. Well, don't worry about the poll. The fun of doing things live. And then, oh, another curiosity that came up was, wait, hold on. Maybe it's because the results are being shared. Let's see if we can troubleshoot.
Yeah, that's what I was also trying to play with.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe I can launch the other one now. Yes, I can. There we go. There's the preset poll. See if you can click that. All right, cool. This is
how come there's no CEO option for this one?
Oh, I don't know. Should have added that. Oh, well, next time. All polls should include I'm the CEO. So then, yeah, one other question I had that was a curiosity, and maybe we can just provide documentation if there is some on the Slack channel, is about that superset metadata you can add to your DBT model. I saw you had the time out there, but is there anything else interesting to fiddle with?
So you can add anything to databases, to datasets, metrics, columns. And this is I think something really clever on the DBT side. Like when you define your config, there's a meta attribute, and like anything can have a meta. It's like a catch-all, and DBT would just ignore that, but it will persist that. So then it's up to clients to basically like interpret that. So any field in the Superset API, you can have a key and a value in your DBT model. And yeah, and it would just overwrite that. So I think the cache is the interesting use case. For databases, like sometimes if you're using some exotic database, you know, you can pass the SQL commit URI directly if you have some custom parameters or something like that. And I don't think it's super useful, but like when you need it, then it's like indispensable.
That makes perfect sense. Then I don't see any other current questions at the moment. If anybody has any, go for it. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and remind anyone watching the YouTube version of this, or anyone that doesn't have their question handy at the moment. Here in the chat is the Slack invitation link again for anyone that missed it. And we created a channel just for this meetup. That's meetup-dbt. So we'll keep that channel open for a couple of weeks or something, and kind of tackle any questions there. Otherwise, yeah, feel free to email either Beto or myself, beto@preset.io and evan@preset.io. And let's see, if there's no other questions, we'll call it a day. Thank you so much, Beto, for the demo. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.